We'll let JP keep his,
Except JP, of course. 6 p.m. Good evening. Welcome to the Easthampton City Council meeting for Wednesday, September 7th. The meeting tonight is being recorded and broadcast by Easthampton Media on Charter Channel 193 and live streaming on their YouTube channel. All councilors and participants in this meeting are gathering hybrid on the executive order by Governor Baker extended to March 2023, which allow us to do so. I remind both the member of the City Council and the public to remain mute until recognized by the City Council President. Also, for the member of the public, please remove your camera for the duration of the meeting unless you are participating in public speak time or the public hearing. Thank you. This meeting is now called to order. Barbara.
Connie Denham. Here. Salem Derby.
Present.
Omar Gomez.
Here.
JP Kaczynski.
Here.
David Munier. Here. Tom Peak.
Here.
Brad Riley.
Here.
Dan Rest.
Here.
Owen Zaret.
Here.
Please stand up for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Yeah, I will take a motion to approve the minutes for August 3rd.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the minutes for August 3rd. Any further discussion? Seeing none. Barbara?
Connie Denham. Aye. Salem Derby.
Aye.
Omar Gomez.
Abstain.
JP Kaczynski.
Abstain.
David Munier.
Aye.
Tom Peak.
Aye.
Brad Riley.
Aye.
Dan Rest.
Aye.
Owen Zaret.
Abstain.
Motion passes. Public speak time. This is the time to address any concern to the council. You're gonna have 3 minutes. Please be respectful. Address your concern or your questions or your comment to the council. You will have 3 minutes and you are allowed to say whatever you want that is not related to the public hearing. Please go to the podium, tell us your name and address, and you will have only 3 minutes. Now the time to participate. And by the way, if you guys are here for the CPC ordinance, we are not gonna do anything with it tonight, but you're still allowed to participate if you want.
I don't think they heard you, so I think they were.
Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Sarah Weinberger, and I live at 359 Main Street in Easthampton. And can I move this over? Because this is the reason I'm speaking.
Go ahead. I don't know what she's saying.
So most of you probably haven't paid attention to this, but this is the last remaining state flag.
Talk to the council, please, to the
Oh,
council.
I'm sorry. This is the last remaining state flag of white supremacy in the United States. Mississippi got rid of theirs in 2021. And if you look, you'll see this was designed in the Puritan era. And there is a Native American with his arrow looking downward, submissive. And there is a sword over his head. And it says, translated, it's we live, by the sword we seek peace. It's demeaning, it's awful, and for 38 years, people in the legislature in Massachusetts have tried to replace it, mostly unsuccessfly. That also includes since 2018, when 54 cities and towns in Massachusetts by January 6th of 2021, or they voted since 2018 to change the flag. Easthampton has not voted, but you're gonna get your opportunity, hopefully, with a resolution that's gonna appear later today. On January 6, 2021, the Massachusetts legislature agreed to appoint a commission to study and recommend a new design. And the commission hopes to introduce the new design by March of 2023. But there's no guarantee the legislature is going to accept it. Remember, 38 years, they didn't accept it. And Native Americans comprise less than 1% of the Massachusetts population. But I believe this is not just a Native American issue. This flag is not only offensive to Native people, it's offensive to all of us who want our state flag to symbolize equality, respect, unity, and peace, not a white man brandishing a sword over a Native person. I implore the Easthampton City Council to pass Councilor Zaret's resolution, which will be introduced tonight. That resolution will instruct our legislators to we will ask them to change the state flag. So thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Hi, I'm Ann Darling. I live at 3 Grant Street here in Easthampton, just south of the Mill Pond. And I also want to speak in support of the resolution to change the flag, seal, and motto. I'm a descendant of the early inhabitants of the Massachusetts Bay Colony, and times have changed. And as I look at our flag and motto, I'm ashamed, and it does not represent what I think Massachusetts is all about. I've been watching the commission meetings, and they're moving pretty slowly, but it's a complex issue. And I'm very heartened by the fact that it is, the leadership is half and half, Native and non-Native. And I do feel confident that they'll come up with something that is good for all of us. But as Sarah said, we don't know what the legislature will do with that. So I do support you approving this resolution. Thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else from here? And I know some people on the want to participate online. I'm gonna let people that are here talking first, and then the people are participating through hybrid.
Hi, my name is Jean Powell Wilson. I'm a clinical psychologist in this area. I live on Main Street in Easthampton, and I just want to urge you to withdraw the ordinance. I understand you're not talking about it tonight, but I just wanted to state my position. The ordinance on deceptive advertising practices of pregnancy care centers. I know that the last time one of the counselors said that this ordinance doesn't have to do with the content. However, this is only talking about you said that it was about protecting consumers. But if it's really about protecting consumers, it should address not only the pregnancy care centers, but all the other organizations that might be relevant as well as, so it would include Planned Parenthood as well. You need to address the deceptive advertising practices of Planned Parenthood. So I just wanted to say that, yeah, that's all I wanted to say. And also, if this was also mentioned in the paper that Planned Parenthood had contacted one of the counselors. So I thought it was interesting at the last meeting that wasn't disclosed. And that seems like it could be a conflict of interest. And I think that should be noted. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else before I go through the people on the computer? Seeing none. I'm going to apologize if I mispronounce the name. So, Ruby?
You mean Ruby?
Yes.
Okay. All right, you guys can hear me then?
Yes.
Okay. My name is Jessica Britton, and I live in the next town over in Westfield. I authored the email that I sent to you guys on July 26 in opposition of the proposed city ordinance targeting pregnancy centers. I did the research, as that's in my specialty area, into the Bethlehem House, Clearway Clinic, and Planned Parenthood just from spending a few hours on their respective websites. I advised in the email the clear mission statements and business practices for these organizations. I also advised that defining a business as deceptive advertising or false advertising will be subjective and in the purview of the decision maker. And that clearly, if you look back at the history of Planned Parenthood, you will see that it is based on racist, aristocratic eugenics operation founded in birth control, not Planned Parenthood, as the name divisively suggests. The founder of Planned Parenthood, Margaret Sanger, aligned herself with the KKK. The Buck versus Bell Supreme Court decision allowing forced sterilization of the unfit without consent nor knowledge, just to name a few. I also advised of the millions of dollars funneled through Planned Parenthood through its vast donor base of global NGOs such as Warren Buffett's Susan Thomas Buffett Foundation, George Soros's Open Society, and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. As I stated in that letter, there is nothing new under the sun with Planned Parenthood. They claim to be for bodily autonomy and women's rights, but their deceptive history and ideologies of eugenics and elite supremacy has not changed. They own the pregnancy crisis market with deep pockets and the definition of a monopoly. By passing this legislation, you are only targeting fair market competition, which is informed consent and loving support of pregnancy birth centers, as you are either complicit with financial motivations or ignorant and naive to what is really playing out. If you are the lesser of two evils stated above respectively, then you have no business representing the people of Easthampton passing laws. Municipalities are corporations and should be run like any Fortune 500 organization. Have any of you or your supporters had an abortion? Were you any teenage girls with an unplanned pregnancy? These days, the term woman and female are held loosely, so I figure I must ask.
Thank you.
I was.
Thank you.
I
It's
was
3 minutes.
pressured into it
Thank
by my
you.
boyfriend.
Thank you. It's 3 minutes. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Anyone else?
Online. You mean online.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I don't see anyone else. All right. I'll move for the communication for elected official boards and committee. I will start with the school disposal authorization and city council resolution. Councilor Kuczynski, I'm gonna allow the vice president first to read the letter that I received from the chairwoman of the school committee, and then you are allowed to read the resolution.
Okay. This is dated August 16th. Dear President Gomez and members of the council, on behalf of the Easthampton School Committee, this letter is to certify that the Maple Elementary School, Center Elementary School, and Pepin Elementary School have been emptied and are no longer needed for school purposes. The school department would still like to retain access to planting materials and the exterior student gardens until the fall of 2022. If any additional information is needed, please feel free to contact me. Sincerely, Cynthia Kuczynski, School Committee Chairperson.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Councilor Kuczynski? You're muted.
Sorry about that. With the letter from the school committee chair and with the motions by the school committee to declare the property surplus for school uses, that they're no longer necessary, there is an opportunity now for the city to go ahead and receive this property and go ahead and apply it for general municipal purposes. I did have a motion, or rather a resolution that contained some items. I will mention just briefly that I was hoping that we would able to be, that the city would be able to establish ownership for the properties in sections B and D, the Center and Pepin schools. And I think that's important. I'll state that here. That being said, there is a resolution drafted and reviewed by the attorney that reads as follows. And I would move for approval of the resolution if that would be appropriate with the chair.
Yes, Councilor Kuczynski.
I move for the approval of the resolution and vote to accept the former schools as no longer necessary for school use. As the city council, as detailed in the minutes of the vote of the school committee for the city of Easthampton, attached here too and incorporated as Exhibit A, and the letter from the chairperson Kwasinski dated August 16, 2022, attached as Exhibit B, the school committee has declared the structures, real property, and fixtures currently used for the school-related purposes at the following locations, collectively known as as former schools, are no longer necessary, are surplus, and may be turned over to the city council for the city of Easthampton. Maple Street School, Severn Chapel Street, Easthampton, Mass. Assessors Map ID 5424, the deed to which is found in Book 1062, page 14 in the Registry of Deeds for Hampshire County. And Pepin School, 4 Park Street, Easthampton, Massachusetts, Assessors Map ID 5282, source of ownership unknown or undetermined at this time. And the Pepin parking lot, Main Street, Easthampton, Assessors Map ID 5577, the deed to which is found in Book 725, page 131 in the Registry of Deeds for Hampshire County, Massachusetts. And the Center School, 9 School Street, Easthampton, Massachusetts, Assessors Map ID 50/80, source of ownership unknown or undetermined at this time. And whereas the city council wishes to accept such former schools on behalf of the city, whereas it is in the city's best interest to accept former schools, and it is anticipated that the city council will subsequently vote to surplus the former schools and vote to release an RSP for their reuse. Whereas should the city wish to dispose the former schools, it would be necessary for the city council to deliberate and vote on whether to declare the former schools surplus, and then to deliberate and vote on the acceptance of a proposal for the purchase and reuse of the former schools. I move the city council vote to accept the former schools for general municipal purposes.
Second. We have a motion and a second for the city council resolution and vote to accept the former schools and no longer necessary for the school use. Any further discussion?
I just wanted to point out that the reason for mentioning the issue of the ownership in Northampton, ownership rights were established with a parcel on Bridge Street in Northampton called the Sheldon Field. It was given to the city way long ago. If those rights were given to the city but reserved for future use by owners, by heirs, that would preclude its use as a school. So we'd have to do other things, preclude its use on our ability to sell the property. So we would have to either find those deeds, and it would encourage the attorney to do so, or be able to create an additional mechanism to be able to either take the property and reestablish it as city property. That being said, I have no further discussion on this.
Thank you, Councilor Kosinski, and I will appreciate next time if you wait just for me to recognize you, so that way the people that are watching us know who's talking. Any other councilor? Seeing none, Barbara?
Salem Derby.
Aye.
Omar Gomez.
Aye.
JP Kaczynski.
Aye.
Dave Munier.
Aye.
Tom Peak.
Aye.
Brad Riley.
Aye.
Dan Rist.
Aye.
Owen Zarrett.
Aye.
Connie Denham. Aye.
Motion passes. We do have more communications, but we're gonna hold that until the public hearing is done. I will take a motion to open a public hearing.
So moved. Second.
We have a motion and a second to open public hearing. Barbara?
Omar Gomez.
Aye.
JP Kaczynski.
Aye.
Dave Munier. Tom Peak.
Aye.
Brad Riley.
Aye.
Dan Rist.
Aye.
Owen Zarrett.
Aye.
Connie Denham. Salem Derby.
Aye.
Motion passes. The first item that we have at the public hearing is the CPA bonding financing request. Councilor Rist.
Thank you, Mr. President. This has been a long time coming, and I'm very happy to say that it's finally before the legislative body to approve. This is a $3.25 million request from the CPA committee to fund the Old Town Hall second floor project to create a performing arts center. The Old Town Hall second floor performing arts auditorium is the largest single project that the CPA fund has ever requested for council approval. The CPA committee has voted unanimously numerous times to support this project. First, 5 years ago, to commit $3 million to the project in a letter of support. 5 times unanimously when it reserved $250,000 in its budget for the project to reduce borrowing costs. And recently in April of this year to increase that commitment to $3.5 million to the project due to the rise in inflationary costs. And finally, unanimous support to send to the council the request to approve the final $3.25 million appropriation, which includes a $2 million bonding request as part of the financing. Council already approved $250K for the first phase of the project. There is in the CPA fund there will be $1.25 million in cash savings, so the financing includes that plus $2 million in borrowing. The CPA committee not only recognizes the huge economic benefit that this project will give the city, but also the expansion of the quality of life this project will bring. Easthampton residents will now enjoy the same quality performances that Northampton and Springfield now do. The CPA, a couple of other notes, the CPA fund has seen a large increase in its revenue stream with a 37% increase just this year, thus allowing for the extra $500,000 for the project. The granting of bonding authority gives city space the leverage it needs. This is important. Gives city space the leverage it needs to finish its pursuit of the final grants for this project. CPA funds are always used to leverage grants in almost every project that it pursues. The purchase of the bond will only take place when City Space has achieved the funds it needs as its match for the project to the satisfaction of the city treasurer and the auditor. There is no limit to how long the bonding authority will be available to the treasurer. In other words, once we pass the bonding, the treasurer and the auditor can bond whenever all of the conditions are met. We can do it hopefully this year, could be next year. The cost of the bond, set now at a 10-year term, might be as high as $300,000 the first year at a 5% interest, but the treasurer hopes that this is a high estimate. The cost is affordable to the CPA fund as it is close to the same amount being saved in its budget each year. We have saved $250,000 each year for this project, so if it's $300,000 and it diminishes over time with the increase in our revenue, the CPA committee does not find that unaffordable. Finally, just to make it clear, no CPA funding is at risk as this project will not go out to bid or begin construction until all funding and construction is in place. Mr. President, if you would allow me, if you would allow yourself to call on President Burns-Maxey to also make some statements regarding this and to answer any questions the council might have.
Yep.
Good evening, councilors. It's good to be here with you tonight. I'm Burns-Maxey. I am a resident of Easthampton at 86 Williston Avenue. And we are incredibly excited about this project coming to fruition. I don't know if you know this, but the Old Town Hall is a city-owned building, and City Space is really, we're the steward of this building. I've been here before in front of you to talk about this project. In fact, I should probably put my reading glasses on because it's been that long since we started this project. I didn't need these. Now I can see. So City Space, I just want to say a few things. City Space is a steward of this city-owned historic building, Old Town Hall. We're a nonprofit. We act as a conduit between the city of Easthampton and this gem of a historic building that's centrally located in the historic Main Street district. And we really, what we do is we are creating a place to preserve the building, but also create a place for people to join together and for artists throughout our region to come and incubate new ideas and to create. Often, the Old Town Hall is one of the first things you see when you come into the city of Easthampton. And it might capture a visitor's eye and they wonder, what is this? What is this building? Often people come in and say, is this where I get my fishing license? And we say, no, this is where you make art. This is where you come together and join together. But the fishing license is right here in this building, as we know. we are thrilled as dedicated volunteers to work alongside the CPA. The CPA has been incredibly generous in this process and helping us. And what this really is procedural. We've been here, we've asked for this funding. Now we're asking for the next steps to bond for this project when we get the match funds in place. We estimate as it's a puzzle, this process is a puzzle of funding this project. We are looking for multitudes of places for funding sources, including state funds, foundation grants, corporate and individual donors. All of these things will come together. Right now we have over 3 million in asks out that we should see return on that investment at the end of this year and coming into the next year. We also have a state economic development bill that's on the governor's desk for $750,000. Just today, I learned from our treasurer, Mike Tausnick, that we had a letter come in for another $50,000 in state historic tax credits. So that brings in $600,000 for those tax credits, which we'll see on the other side of the project, which will go directly into maintaining the facility as a whole. So what we're really trying to do here is create a sustainable organization that will help the city maintain this building and also create that sort of level playing field where it's economic development for our city, but it's also a place of affordability and accessibility for artists and our community to come together. So what I'd like to do is really just answer any questions that you might have about the project. I know that Councilor Rist shared, I believe, a presentation as well as our application, and what questions you might have that I can answer.
Okay, any councilor have any questions to Councilor Rest or to anyone else? No? No one have a question? Nothing? A comment? No? All right, I guess now.
Okay.
I guess we are excited about this project. I hope this happen because it's gonna help the community and it's gonna be, I think it's gonna be great. Before the motion, I want to let the public participate, yeah. Is anyone from the public who wanna participate, they wanna make a comment or question, please go to the podium and I'm gonna allow the people who is at the chamber first and then I'm going through the people in the computer. Can you please state your name and address for the record?
Yes, Laura Baldwin, Westfield, Mass. And I just wanted to say, if this is for mixed use, right? You're having it for artists and for people to come in and congregate there, but would there not be space for elderly people in the city that have been paying taxes for many, many years that could have some housing there as well?
Can't answer that. It's not part of the project right now, ma'am.
It's not, oh, I thought the sustainability thing was for like mixed use, like, you know, for housing and businesses being combined together. That's part of the sustainability program.
Do you want me to answer? All I can say is that this particular project does not have that, but we just put 3 buildings for surplus, which will have that.
What buildings are those?
The new the schools we just declared surplus. We built a new school, and those 3 buildings we hope will be affordable housing, especially for seniors.
For seniors,
We're
good.
not oblivious to the fact that this is important to the city, that particular item you're talking about.
All right, thank you very much.
Anyone else from the public who wanna participate?
Hi, my name is Tom Brown. I'm a member of the Economic Development Commission, and I'm going to echo a few comments that you might hear in a few minutes and a letter I believe you received from our chair. The Economic Development Commission strongly supports this funding, this project, knowing the economic benefits that it brings to the city. We've said for years, can you imagine a performance space that might hold 250 or 300 people that lets out at 7 o'clock or 8 o'clock at night, and those people are in our city attending our restaurants and businesses and what have you. So this could be a huge economic benefit for the city as a whole. So we strongly support the CPA funding of the project. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else before I go to the computer? Do you know? Wayne?
She disappeared.
Gwen was here. There you go, you're back.
You're muted.
You're muted, yeah.
Hi, I know. I pressed the wrong button. I'm Gwen Morrissey. I am a resident at 17 Mayor Street in Easthampton, and I'm also the chair of the Economic Development and Industrial Commission. And as Tom Brown shared, the Economic Development and Industrial Commission is super double bonus pro Old Town Hall renovation and anything that the city of Easthampton can do to support making that vision of that project a reality. We are super excited that Easthampton continues to be on this roll. We have momentum. We have these increasing numbers, little windows of opportunity to do great things for the long-term sustainability of our business environment, as well as for the artsy feel that Easthampton has come to be known for in Western Mass. And we're really proud of that, and we want to ensure that the city knows that we care about that, and we're out to support it. And just go team CPA funds.
Thank you. Hadel?
Just to clarify on the process, this is going to be an authorization, which is going to be given to mayor, and with mayor's team, which involves financial team, which involves treasurer and auditor, will decide when to borrow and in what amount. I just wanted to put this procedural clarification out there.
Thank you, Hadel. Anyone else from the public? Any counselors before we make a motion? Counselor Pete?
Yeah, so first of all, I definitely support this. I think it's great. Second of all, just for the benefit of the public, I know that sometimes when we spend large amounts of money or authorize for large amounts of money to be bonded out of CPA, you hear sort of comments about like, oh, well, what about this thing or that thing? You didn't have money for that, but you had money for this. You had this big fight over school funding, but you have money for this. And so I just wanted, like, I'm sure Dan Ricci could probably say this better than I could, but CPA money has specific things that we can do with it, and they're very specific. And in this case, if I'm not mistaken, the reason we are able to spend this money on this project is because it's a beautiful historic building, and this falls under historic preservation. So we're allowed to spend a certain amount of this money out of CPA on historic preservation. There's lots of other worthy, good things in the city that we are not allowed to spend this money on. So I just feel like that's an important thing to just state publicly whenever we come into having these conversations about spending large amounts of CPA money, because I don't know that that's widely understood by the taxpayers. So that's all.
Thank you, Councilor Peak. Any other councilors? Councilor Rist?
I'm going to make a motion, if that's all right, Mr. President. Before I make the motion, I just want to echo what our auditor said. We are giving bonding authority to the city and the CPA committee through the city for $2 million. When that bond happens, that's the maximum we will bond, but not necessarily what we will actually bond. Perhaps the city will get some infrastructure money or something that can reduce that bonding. Whenever we can reduce borrowing, it saves the CPA, in this case, the CPA fund interest costs. This is why we're adding the $1.25 million in cash, reducing interest. The other thing to point out to the residents, our bonding authority, our bonding capability is really supported by the fact that we have a very high AA+, AAA. I can't remember what the rating of our bonding authority is, but our financial stability of this city is one of the best in the state, and because of that, we have saved literally hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars in interest for the bond for the school, which was $60-some million. And we're going to save money on this bond because we have a strong fiscal position in the city. So I just wanted to echo those comments and also to tell the council that the Finance Committee approved this 3-0. so I will now make a motion.
That's correct.
This motion was provided to us by the city's bonding counsel, bonding attorney. I move that the city council approve pursuant to the recommendation of the Community Preservation Committee, $3,250,000 is hereby appropriated from the Community Preservation Fund to pay costs of rehabilitating and restoring the old town hall in order to make it more functional for its intended use, which is for performing arts and other community purposes as contemplated by Chapter 83 of the Acts of 2018 of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, and the lease agreement between the city and City Space Incorporated, effective January 1st, 2019, related to the Old Town Hall, and to pay any other costs incidental and related thereto, the Old Town Hall project, that this appropriation from the Community Preservation Fund shall be in addition to any state grants and private donation raised by City Space to fund the Old Town Hall project. That to meet this appropriation, the Old Town Hall project, $1,250,000 shall be transferred from the Community Preservation Fund, and the treasurer, with the approval of the mayor, is authorized to borrow $2 million under the pursuant to Chapter 44B, Section 11 of the General Laws, or pursuant to any other enabling authority, and that the mayor is authorized to take any action necessary to carry out the Old Town Hall project.
Second.
We have a motion and a second for the CPA bonding financing request, Old Town Hall City Space Project. Any further discussion? Seeing none, Barbara.
J.P. Kaczynski,
Aye.
Dave Munier, Tom Peak,
Aye.
Brad Riley,
Aye.
Dan Rist,
Aye.
Owen Sarah,
Aye.
Connie Denham. Aye. Salem Derby,
Aye.
Omer Gomez.
Aye. Motion passes.
Just one last comment, Mr.
Thank you.
President, if I may.
No, it's, we're gonna move for full storage amendment, sorry.
I just wanted to thank the.
We already passed it, so, Councilor Sarek?
Thank you, Mr. President. So we have before us a request from River Valley Co-op for a amended license for 5,000 gallon above storage tank for liquid propane. This is an amended license because previously on the site there was below ground storage for gasoline tanks, I believe, which were removed a while ago. We met, and the Public Safety Committee met on this topic, and Mr. Evan Lash was present from River Valley Co-op. We discussed this, and it was explained to us that they have increased requirements due to their gas needs for 2,000 gallon above ground liquid propane containers. And the difference, the extra 1,000 gallon difference, is for potential ancillary needs for potentially other structures on the property if they're doing some other big event. In the meantime, I also spoke with Captain Constantine, who stated that there were no issues from the fire department side. I see him here in the back today, and Mr. Lash is here as well. This was approved 3-0, but I see that both Mr. Lash and Captain Constantine are here, Mr. President, so if you'd like either of them to present.
Please, if they have to add something, sure. No? Any councilor have any questions or comment about this one? No? Any from the?
Yeah.
I'm
Sorry, so this is a kind of policy weakness of mine. I don't understand things like this. So can we just, for my knowledge to clarify, is this structures that are being put in the ground, or are they going to be installed somewhere on their property, like above ground?
They're above storage they're above ground storage tanks, so that's not my, we do have members here from the fire department and from the co-op who might be able to explain even better, but they're basically, if you picture your grill, and tell me if I'm getting this wrong, but it's very large versions of that are permanently installed or semi-permanently installed outside the building.
Okay.
Is it close?
Yeah, do you want me to add anything?
If you want to add something.
Yeah, so the land
Can you
license.
please just state your name and address
Sorry,
for
yes,
the
sure.
record?
Yeah, Dan Constantine, I'm your fire prevention officer, 17 Melinda. A land license is needed when per state law, per the fire regulations, anything over 2,000 gallons of storage on a property. So they're at 2,000 gallons right now, so that's why we're going for the land license. These are, there's a 2,000 gallon tank there. It was, installed well within the regulations. And the other one, I've met with the vendor that's gonna be doing it, who's present tonight. And I've gone over the specifications for that and have kind of pre-approved where that one's going to be too. It's gonna be right next to it. It's well protected and what have you. So that's what it's kind of for, and it's for to serve their kitchen, because as you know, we have a moratorium, so they can't get any natural gas, so they have to use the propane. So it's to help to serve their kitchen, and also in the very colder months, it helps to augment and supplement the heat of the building too. So instead of the gas company coming in and keep filling every so often, we want to increase the storage, and as the fire department, we're in support of this. So hopefully that answers
Yeah, absolutely does.
the question. And then again, the reason why we went a little bit above was because if he wants to bring in, like in the past, if we would have put it at 4,000 gallons, he couldn't technically bring in a gas grill, and do something, because sometimes they do some things outside for promotions and stuff. So that's why we went just a little bit above, to give him some cushion there for that, so.
Okay, perfect, thank you, I appreciate
Any
it.
other councilor? Anyone from the public have any comment or question about this? Seeing none, Councilor Sarek.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'll now make a motion. I move that the City Council approve the request of River Valley LLC, located at 40 Main Street, Florence, Mass., for permission to amend on existing fuel storage license at 228 Northampton Street, Easthampton, Massachusetts, to allow for the above-ground storage of 5,000 gallons of liquid propane in two 2,000-gallon containers.
We have a motion and a second for the fuel storage amendment in 228 Northampton Street. Any further discussion? Seeing none, Barbara?
Dave Munier.
Aye.
Tom Peak.
Aye.
Brad Riley.
Aye.
Dan Rist.
Aye.
Owen Zaret.
Aye.
Connie Denham. Aye. Salem Derby.
Aye.
Omar Gomez.
Aye.
JP Kaczynski.
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you, Councilor Sarek. Councilor Kuczynski, the utility pole locations?
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. We have 3 requests for utility pole locations, Loudville Road, Main Street, and Cherry Street. The property committee had met and reviewed these 3 requests. They were unanimously approved by the property committee 3-0, and for recommendation to the council for approval. There was no one questioning these locations at any of the meetings. So the first one is with a request from Eversource Energy to install a pole at approximately across the street from 74 Loudville Road. I would be happy to answer any further questions, should there be any.
Any councilor have any question about this particular one? No, before you make a motion, let the public participate. Any from the public have any question or concern about this pole location? Seeing none, Councilor Kuczynski?
I move the city council approve the request of Eversource Energy to install one solely owned pole, approximately 95 feet northwesterly of the existing pole at 100/17, approximately 170 feet southeasterly of existing pole 100/18, and approximately 24 feet from the center line of Loudville Road, to bring power to an underground to 17 units in a new neighborhood development. The petitioner agrees to reserve space for one cross arm at a suitable point on a pole for fire and police telephone signals, 2 wires to the municipality, and used by it exclusively for municipal purposes.
Second?
We have a motion and a second to the utility pole location in Louisville Road. Any further discussion? Seeing none, Barbara?
Tom Peak.
Aye.
Brad Riley.
Aye.
Dan Rist.
Aye.
Owen Zaret.
Aye.
Connie Denham. Aye. Salem Derby.
Aye.
Omar Gomez.
Aye.
JP Kaczynski.
Aye.
Dave Munier.
Motion passes. Councilor Kuczynski?
There is a request from Eversource Energy to install install one newly solely owned pole at near 277 Main Street. Basically, in this situation, there was a guy wire that was being used, attached to a tree. That tree has become defunct and needs to be taken down. Actually, there isn't much of a tree. It's just basically a stump, and install a new pole. So again, we had met and voted 3-0 here.
Any councilor have any question about the Main Street utility pole location? Seeing none, anyone from the public have any comment or question about this one? Seeing none, Councilor Kosinski?
I move the city council approve the request of Eversource Energy to install one new solely owned pole on Main Street near 277 Main Street to remove existing tree guide. The petitioner agrees to reserve space for one crossarm at a suitable point on the pole for fire and police telephone signal wires to the municipality and used by it exclusively for municipal purposes.
Second.
We have a motion and a second for the utility pole location at Main Street. Any further discussion? Seeing none, Barbara?
Brad Riley.
Aye.
Dan Rist.
Aye.
Owen Zaret.
Yes.
Connie Denham. Aye. Salem Derby.
Aye.
Omar Gomez.
Aye.
JP Kaczynski.
Aye.
Dave Munier. Tom Peak.
Aye.
Motion passes. Councilor Kosinski?
In the Cherry Street instance, there is a pole location to be relocated near the intersection of Stone Path and Cherry Street. Again, 3-0 recommending, and no one was opposed speaking against this.
Any councilor have any questions? Seeing none, anyone from the public have any question or comment about this location? Seeing none, Councilor Kosinski?
I move the city council approve the request by Eversource Energy and Verizon New England to relocate one jointly owned pole numbered T2/E5 to a point on the north side of Cherry Street, approximately 16 feet easterly from the center line of Stone Path Lane, to accommodate a road construction project for the distribution of intelligence and telecommunications for the transmission of high and low voltage electric current. The petitioner agrees to reserve space for one crossarm at a suitable point on a pole for fire and police telephone signal wires to the municipality and used by it exclusively for municipal purposes.
Second.
We have a motion and a second for the utility pole location of Cherry Street. Any further discussion? Seeing none, Barbara?
Dan Rist.
Aye.
Owen Zaret.
Aye.
Connie Denham. Aye. Salem Derby.
Aye.
Omar Gomez. JP Kaczynski.
Aye.
Dave Munier.
Aye.
Tom Peak.
Aye.
Brad Riley.
Aye.
Motion passes. I will take a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to close public hearing, Barbara?
Owen Zaret.
Aye.
Connie Denham. Aye. Salem Derby.
Aye.
Omar Gomez.
Aye.
JP Kaczynski.
Aye.
Dave Munier. Tom Peak.
Aye.
Brad Riley.
Aye.
Dan Rist.
Aye.
Motion passes. We go back to the communication for the elected official boards and committee. We have Jamie Webb that she's going to present, do a presentation to the council about the master plan and quick actions.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Jamie Webb, Assistant Planner for the city. I'm here tonight with Julie Busa from Fuss & O'Neill to present the findings, recommendations, and some concept plans from the new city infrastructure master plan. Before I turn it over to Julie, I just want to provide you with some background on the project. So in the spring of 2021, the Planning Department and DPW solicited a request for proposals for consulting services to conduct a infrastructure planning study for the new city neighborhood. Funding for this project comes from the Community Development Block Grant Program. Fuss & O'Neill with Julie Busa as the project manager was chosen by the city through the RFQ process to conduct this work. Julie holds a PhD in evolution, ecology, and organic biology from Ohio State University and is a senior environmental scientist and certified senior ecologist in the Water and Natural Resources Group at Fuss & O'Neill. She's worked with the city on a number of other projects that have received city funding from the Municipal Vulnerability Preparedness Grant Program, such as the citywide Green Infrastructure Master Plan, the Cherry Street Green Infrastructure and Roadway Improvement Project, which is currently under construction, and she authored the Easthampton Homeowners DIY guidebook to stormwater management. She's also a resident of Easthampton. The planning study was a comprehensive assessment analysis of water, sewer, drainage, sidewalks, walking surfaces, connections to the rail trail and public parks, looking at roadway surfaces, traffic patterns, street trees, potential opportunities for green infrastructure, and neighborhood park improvements. We held 2 community meetings, one in November of 2021 at the Carson Street Playground, and to gather input on the existing conditions from the residents. We also had a community meeting in May of 2022 to gather input on the conceptual designs that were proposed by Fuss & O'Neill. We also met with the Board of Public Works last month to present our findings. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Julie. She has a presentation, and after she presents, you're welcome to ask either or both of us questions about the project.
Thank you, Jamie. Again, my name is Julianne Busa, and Jamie's already given a wonderful introduction, but just a bit more background about the project. She mentioned the funding through CDBG. Anyone who's familiar with the New City neighborhood knows that this is an old neighborhood. Most of the infrastructure in that neighborhood is original, which makes it about 100 years old. And so the core of this project is really updating everything and bringing up to modern standards. And that includes all of the underground infrastructure improvements that are needed for water, sewer, drainage, as well as updating the streetscape and adding some community amenities. We were also focused on accessibility, both in terms of ADA accessibility, of sidewalks, of ramps, as well as accessibility for residents of the neighborhood into and out of the neighborhood to get to other parts of the city, to get to the rail trail, et cetera. Outreach and engagement, as Jamie already hinted at, was a really core element of this project, and I'll talk more about that in a few moments. The plan is available on the city's website, on the planning website, for anybody to take a look at. And if you go through that, you'll see there are several goals and themes that emerge in the plan. Planning for the next 100 years. We know that the city has a lot of work to do, a lot of infrastructure needs. When we update New City, we're not going to go back and do it again in 20 years. So we want to be looking forward, which means that we are being proactive about resilience. We're thinking about future climate conditions and thinking about things like cost effectiveness for ease of maintenance and operations to make sure that the updates that are made now are going to be updates for the long term. This is a very neighborhood-focused and neighborhood-driven plan. That was a key part of why we were so interested in bringing the public out to talk to us and find out what was important to neighborhood residents. And we're presenting this and thinking about it as a phased approach. Because we're looking at updating the entire neighborhood, obviously this isn't something we're going to be able to do in one fell swoop. This is going to be expensive, and so we're looking at updates over potentially 10 or 15 years. And we want to make sure that when all of those updates are done, it doesn't feel piecemeal, but that there's a holistic project that comes together in the end, even though it's going to have to be built gradually. I'm going to go through briefly some of the key findings from our different assessments that were done. So the first piece of this project was to go out into the field and look at the conditions of all of the surface and underground infrastructure. So in terms of sewer, as you're looking at this map, which I realize is not huge on your screens, again, this is available on the city website, so you can take a closer look. But the coloring sort of goes from red is the worst to green is the best. But I'll emphasize again that everything is 100 years old. So even if it's in relatively good condition, it still needs to be updated. But the red here indicates areas that need immediate attention. A couple of key findings in terms of sewer are a significant capacity deficiency on Parsons, which brings together not only sewerage from the New City neighborhood, but from other neighborhoods, and then carries it north to the wastewater treatment plant. So that deficiency needs to be addressed. There are also 3 areas of backyard sewers where rather than the sewer running under the road, where it's relatively easy to get to, it runs between homes in their backyards in easements which at this point have not necessarily been maintained. There are sheds, there are some trees, and so it's much harder to do maintenance on those areas. And so that's something that we're thinking about as we think about how best to update that. Switching over to water system, we found that the pressure in New City is actually very good, which was a little bit of a surprising finding. So when it comes to where the priority areas are for updates in the water system, it's really going to be driven by the hydrants. Some of the hydrants in that neighborhood are so old that the city tries not to touch them for fear that they won't be able to shut them off again, or that they're going to fail and lead to emergency repairs. So they're operational in the case of an emergency, but we don't want to run them for maintenance purposes. So those areas are where we would aim for first to do our updates. The other key factor in this neighborhood is that there's limited valving to the water system, which means that when there is a repair needed, they can't isolate it. And so a much larger portion of the neighborhood residents are impacted. So with the updates, more valving would allow DPW to go in and isolate certain areas that needed work. And so adding those valves over time as the updates are put in and different streets are upgraded would be a key part of the water system plan. The pipes now are mixed sizes, so ultimately those would all get upgraded to 8-inch ductile iron, which is the current standard. Currently, they're a mixture of asbestos cement and cast iron. Asbestos cement is not a concern in the way that other asbestos materials might be, but what we do worry about is that as soon as we start going in to do repairs or upgrade other elements, that pipe can be brittle and cause breakages. And so that's something that we need to be mindful of as we're beginning to do upgrades of the various infrastructure in the neighborhood. We also looked at street trees and canopy cover, and as you can see from this map, most of the canopy in the neighborhood is concentrated along Emerald Place at the top of the slope above Lower Mill Pond. There's also some tree coverage in sort of the edges of the old school parcel, but there is not a lot of space in the right-of-way for planting, and I'll talk in a little bit about how we hope to address that to bring more shade and tree cover to the neighborhood. I think anyone who has spent any time walking New City or driving it knows that the condition of the roadways and sidewalks is variable, but generally not so good. Again, you can kind of see from the coloring where some of the worst areas are. The interior streets tend to be the worst conditions. Most of the ramps, nearly all of the ramps, in fact, are not ADA compliant. Within that non-compliance, there are varying degrees of functionality. So some are more able to be used even though they aren't officially compliant. Others are really challenging for instance, someone in a wheelchair. There are also two key missing sidewalk connections, one along the south end of Emerald Place, which we understood from residents to be a key walking corridor that people enjoy using, but they don't have a safe space to do that. And the other is a short stretch at the south end of Broderick that would connect to Everett Street, and there's a missing piece of sidewalk connection there. Drainage and erosion have been a major concern in the neighborhood over the last few years. You may have heard of some of the issues, particularly along Emerald Place, where sections of the sidewalk have collapsed, and there's a sinkhole just west of the end of Clinton Street. So DPW has been doing some emergency repairs. That really stems from the fact that this is a highly impervious neighborhood. It's very densely built out. There's limited space between the sidewalks and homes, so there's a lot of pavement or concrete. And the water from the entire neighborhood essentially drains to a couple of outfalls along Emerald Place. And so that's where problems tend to be concentrated. There's also issues with ponding and sediment on the interior streets, which are exacerbated by the road conditions and all of the various saw cutting that has happened over time, creating lumpy roads. And so the approach that we're recommending here is a blend of green infrastructure, similar to what we're doing now on Cherry Street, to have less water that ultimately makes it to the outfalls that has to be handled over on Emerald Place, and allowing more space for the water to sink into the ground dispersed throughout the neighborhood, and then pairing that with a traditional gray infrastructure or pipe system to take the excess out of the neighborhood. So I'm going to turn now to public process. Jamie already mentioned that we had a number of meetings, and we thought it was really important to meet people where they are. And so we met and invited folks to come out, have cider, have donuts, join us on a Saturday morning in the neighborhood. And we brought all of this data that we've collected, a bunch of maps, and showed this to everyone and asked them to write on sticky notes, write their notes, mark up the maps, tell us what additional information we needed to know. And then we broke into groups and did walking tours through the neighborhood. And so we were really interested in hearing from people both the problems that they're experiencing, where they're seeing them, and also what their visions are for what the neighborhood could be. And we got a lot of really interesting and valuable information out of that. We took that back along with our physical assessments and created a set of concepts. And then we went back with those concepts in the spring and presented those to folks, again, meeting at Parsons Street Park and asking people to reflect on them, tell us, what did we hear correctly? What did we miss? What more would you like to see here? And those comments then went into the final concepts, which are presented in the plan that you can view online. We do anticipate that there will be many more opportunities for engagement to come. So as specific projects within the neighborhood begin to move forward to detailed design, we'll again be inviting people to participate more fully in dialing in what those specific projects are going to look like. This is a graphic of the overall master plan concept, and crucially what you can't see here are all of the updated underground utilities that are key to the plan. But what you see on the surface is the dispersed green infrastructure, and so you can see the tree box filters are represented with trees here. That gives us an excellent opportunity to introduce a lot more tree canopy cover into the interior streets, as well as simultaneously be handling stormwater through green infrastructure practices. And you'll also see, and we'll go into these in more specific detail over the next few slides, the 5 targeted community improvement projects that are proposed as part of the plan. The first of those is along Emerald Place. And one of the things that we heard from residents was, why not think about making this street one way? And that is an idea that really frees up a lot of space to meet a lot of needs on that street, both in terms of creating formalized parking to get people away from the edge of slope where parking informally has caused a lot of erosion and problems. It allows us to put in a formal walkway and meet that missing sidewalk, and potentially even have a connection through a pedestrian path that would lead from the end of Emerald down to Everett Street. It provides space for green infrastructure, gives us more opportunities and flexibility in how we stabilize that slope to address the problems that have been occurring over the last couple of years, and will also be key to making an improved connection out to Ferry Street and the bike path beyond. That is directly linked to the concept for the Lincoln Street corridor. Lincoln Street is by far the widest street in the neighborhood, and because of that, it's treated as a bit of a dragway and a cut-through. And so to both address speeding and to provide improved pedestrian access and multimodal access, the concept here is to utilize that wide right-of-way and paved space to incorporate an 8-foot wide multi-use path along with a buffer between the path and the road that would be a place for tree planting and green infrastructure. And then that inherently narrows the roadway to a width that will sort of automatically promote traffic calming. And this provides also a linkage from the neighborhood, through the neighborhood and from the various interior streets to meet up to the rail trail and help people to connect out to other parts of the city. The last missing piece there for that connection is at Ferry Street. This is a place where currently to be able to get to the brand new section of bike path that was built as part of the One Ferry project, you actually have to cross the street, walk about 30 feet, and then cross the street again. And those are both somewhat dangerous crossings because of the visibility issues. And so the idea here is to have that multi-use path and improved sidewalk that come up to a pocket park at the corner, and then a pedestrian bridge that would link people without having to cross the street at all to get over to that bike path extension and onward to the rail trail or the mills. The remaining 2 sites are the 2 interior parcels that are city-owned. So at Carson Street Park, we talked about, right now, that park has what I understand is one of the most heavily used bike share stations in the city, which is excellent. But otherwise, there's not a lot there. There's a couple of toddler swings and a bench or 2. And so this proposal, the idea was to capture multi-age activities, to make ADA accessible paths through the park, to provide shade both through some shade structures, but also through tree planting. Most of the trees that were in that parcel have been removed over recent years. There would be nature-inspired landscaping, integrated again with green infrastructure to address stormwater. And you can see along the south edge here where the plan calls for investigating the possibility of a path along the Parsons apartments that would connect over to what is currently the vacant parcel that was once part of the former school property. And so these two spaces would become sort of a joint park where they have separate but complementing uses. And so the idea was not to replicate the uses, but to have the two function as sort of a larger whole. And so again, looking at multi-age activities, you can see in this particular concept, we have a basketball court, we have theme structures for play for younger children, we have open recreational spaces, gathering spaces, as well as community garden plots, again, walking paths that would be ADA accessible. And another thing that we were trying to do here was to preserve important uses for wintertime. And so the gravel event space that's proposed would also double as snow storage in the winter, because this is currently an important snow storage location for DPW for all of the snow that accumulates in the neighborhood. And we felt it was important in all of the conversations that we had with residents that this was really meant to be a neighborhood park. And so the focus is on pedestrian accessibility. There are a few parking spaces, but really we're looking for this not to be something that draws a lot of people into the neighborhood, but that serves the people who are already there. So in terms of what's next, the Emerald Place project recently was awarded an MVP grant for the FY23 round, and so you'll be hearing more about that over the next several weeks as that gets underway. That will be one of those opportunities where baked into that proposal were a number of opportunities for people to come out into the neighborhood again, have more engagement, and help to refine that design. And as detailed designs for different parts of the project move forward, we're really thinking about matching different project phases to funding. And so we have sort of all of the data that we have gives us priorities in terms of which streets we would like to work on first in an ideal scenario. But echoing Councilor Peak's comments from earlier, matching projects to the funding that's available is really what makes projects able to get done. And so we've designed this to be flexible in order to respond to funding opportunities that are out there. Emerald Place is a perfect match for MVP. Other funding sources will be a good match for other projects. And so we're really thinking about this as how to move everything forward holistically, but also matching up the right projects at the right time to the right funding source. And with that, I will open it up to any questions.
Thank you, Julianne. Any councilor have any questions? Councilor Riley.
So I have two. Would you like me to do one first and wait, or do both?
One first.
Okay. All right. So, just in thinking about where we're going in the future here, I know you suggested that if we're going to do this, we're gonna make an investment that lasts a long time. Sorry, I gotta take this off while I talk. So over the last 20 years, we've had more impacts from tropical storms and hurricanes in New England than the previous 100 years combined. There is every reason to believe that is either going to stay the same or it could potentially increase. So have the hydrology forecasts taken into consideration those storms' impact on Emerald Place, specifically thinking about slope stability, the actual water drainage systems that we create, the natural underground water structures, and then also, the plant root structures that are in the slope leading down to Lower Mill Pond. I know it's kind of a long question, but has that been taken into consideration?
It is part of the scope for the MVP project that was just funded. So MVP, for anyone who's not aware, is the state's climate resilience program. And so it's very much focused on thinking about increased precipitation and the different patterns of precipitation that we're seeing. So a part of that project will be looking at a hydrologic study for the drainage throughout the neighborhood, how it ultimately culminates at Emerald Place, and what that looks like not only under current conditions, but under predicted future conditions.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Councilor Rist.
Thank you for this presentation. Your value to our community is going to be stated later. Obviously, this project the entire scope of it is a multi-million-dollar project. But what concerns me the most, you shocked me a little bit about the fire hydrants. And I'm a little loath to want to wait for grants to come in to replace these hydrants when you tell me if they turn them on, they can't turn them off. And I am concerned that they can't do maintenance, which suggests that, God help us if there's a fire and a hydrant doesn't work because there wasn't maintenance. So I'm wondering, has there been discussions with the city, the mayor, anybody, about moving forward with replacement of fire hydrants before we start waiting for grants? Because you know the grant process is months or years. So that scared me a lot. And I'm wondering, the new city residents ought to be safe. So I'm wondering what you thought of that.
I think, I don't want to speak on behalf of the fire department or DPW, but I don't think that there is an imminent safety concern. There is more of a concern in terms of if they are needed to be used, it then poses a reactive maintenance and repair concern. That is my understanding. But to your larger question, I think that the 5 targeted projects that I highlighted, those are the most ripe for sort of matching up to good grant sources. The city, and Jamie can speak more to this, but the intent, I believe, for the next several rounds potentially of CDBG funding is to look at the next steps of this project, and that is most likely to focus on some of that's most likely to be the right source for a lot of the sort of interior streets, less kind of shiny projects, but the more just everyday update projects. And there may be other sources as well coming from retained earnings or other sources that would be used for some of those updates. So I think it's not necessarily waiting for the right grant to come along, but there's going to be parallel tracks of different parts of the project and the neighborhood updates going forward with multiple funding sources that would include grant funds that we have to compete for, as well as more stable and consistent funds that we can plan around.
Thank you. Before going back to Councilor Riley, any other councilors? No, Councilor Riley?
Okay, and then so my second question I think is, it might be adjacent to the work that you're talking about here in this plan. So, you know, essentially what you've presented here to me looks like it's going to increase outdoor activity in this area of the city, which I really like. I think that we need to revitalize this whole area. There is one longstanding concern in this area that I think could potentially be exacerbated by having more people out and about, and that is specifically where Ferry Street and Carson Street come together. So whether you're a pedestrian or if you're a driver, once you come to that intersection, as you look to the left, there is this massive kind of outcropping of soil, right? You know the specific area I'm talking about. Would reshaping that area be something that could be included in this kind of plan, or is that something that we need to look at externally? Because I feel like it's a public safety issue, but I mean, if we're really going to revitalize and redo this entire area, to me, I feel like if we could do this at the same time as all of these things, that would be the time to do it. I don't know what your thoughts are.
Yes. The main reason that is not specifically reflected in this plan is that the city was already moving forward to look at that issue separately. Okay. And so it's very much at the forefront of what's being considered. It would be part of any construction that involves these areas. And it may even wind up taking precedence and happening earlier, because I know that it is a major concern for residents. We talked about it during our on-site events, but we didn't focus on it in this plan because it's being looked at separately.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Julianne, and thank you, Jamie. I represent New City. I participate in those 2 events. Thank you for hearing the people in New City. For the first time in so many years, finally the city is going to do something with the New City. They need it, and I'm happy to see the progress in that area, because the whole area and the neighborhood need it. Again, thank you.
Welcome. Thank you.
Any other communication for elected officials, any councilors?
Is this actually communications?
Yeah,
Oh.
elected commission, yeah, we don't have it.
I
Yeah.
missed the, before I had my chance to.
Councilor Sarek.
Yes, just a couple things. I thought it was important to acknowledge, and certainly there's members of the community here who I think are here on this topic, that we've all spoken about the recent vandalism committed in our community. I feel that we need to resolve our issues with conversations, even if we disagree strongly on issues. And destruction of private property, public property, is not an acceptable form of expressing oneself. There's many other ways to do that. We need to lead with compassion, and we need to understand our differences. Just really quickly too, outside of that, Mr. President, just couple upcoming events. Mill Pond Live is happening this weekend. Was that the 9th and 10th? And then the 16th and 17th. I believe it starts at 5 p.m. So whether you're attending or driving through town and wondering why it might be a little louder than usual, or you can't find parking, that's why. And also Art in the Orchard is happening, so make sure you check that out. And that's all I had.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Rist.
Just a moment, I wanted to thank the council. You know I've been passionate about the City of Space project. Thank you for voting unanimously to support it. I need the power of your voice, the eloquence of your written language to get to our elected officials, to get to the administration, anywhere a grant might be being considered. I have written to our elected officials in support of city space grants. Anything you can do to help push this forward, not just the vote this evening. We need to keep this momentum going, and I ask you to do a little more in the sense that they have a little bit of a hill to climb to get the grants that they expect to get. Anything we can do for that as individual counselors. Your voices are good and they will be listened to. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Riley?
Thank you, Mr. President. I do apologize. This is more talking than I've done in probably the last 8 months. So I was disheartened to learn this week that the Undoing Racism workshop was postponed due to lack of participation from city employees and elected officials. As someone who went through this workshop last year alongside police and fire department leadership and a few members of city council, I personally found the process to be educational, compassionate, supportive, and forward-thinking. As a predominantly white city in an increasingly diverse region, engaging in these types of workshops that asks us to think critically about the issues of racism, oppression, and poverty are vital to the future of our community's health and well-being. When the workshops are rescheduled, I strongly urge all of you who have not participated in the workshops to do so. We need you to be a part of this solution if we're ever going to move forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Krasinski.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just wanted to reiterate and place on record my stand with regard to the vandalism that occurred in the city. There is absolutely no place for violence or vandalism of any sort. Conversation is exactly what is needed. Listening is what is needed. And I wanted to lend that voice to Councilor Zaretz and to impress on the community that there are ways to talk to one another. There are ways to listen to one another. Let's use them.
Thank you, Councilor. Any other councilor? Seeing none. Mayor's communication. The mayor is not here tonight, but we have in a package an affordable housing resolution that the mayor present to the council. I'm going to allow any councilors to make a comment. No question because she's not here to answer anything. But if any councilor want to make a comment about the resolution, you are allowed to do so. Any councilor? Councilor Rest?
I just want to fully support this resolution. Affordable housing is so important as we look at what we're going to do with these three old schools. Affordable housing, affordable housing, affordable housing. We need it in this city more than ever. The cost of housing is skyrocketed, and I thank the mayor for putting forward this resolution. And I know it's already in the record, but I encourage the residents to read it it's important to know that the city and the city council certainly support affordable housing.
Thank you, Councilor Riley.
Thank you, Mr. President. So over the last 4 years, the city and public has been engaged in a collaborative process of designing a future for Easthampton that is economically vibrant, sustainable, and socially just. This started with the Downtown Strategic Plan in 2018, was reaffirmed in the 2020 Housing Production Plan, and in 2021, a school reuse committee which sought to draft an RFP for development of the Maple, Pepin, and Center schools. Simultaneously, the Affordable and Fair Housing Partnership applied for and was approved for a municipal engagement program through CHAPA to develop a community-led housing coalition to advocate for affordable housing in Easthampton, and I believe many of you have already met some of these advocates. Central to these initiatives is resounding support from the public, the Planning Department, the Community Preservation Act Committee, EDIC, and advocacy groups like the Affordable and Fair Housing Partnership and the Easthampton Housing Coalition, culminating in this proclamation from the mayor and signed by Kayam Jamrog McQuaid, coordinator of the Easthampton Housing Coalition, Jana Tetro, of the chair of the Affordable and Fair Housing Partnership, and Gwen Morrissey, chair of EDIC. Having participated in each of these initiatives, it should come to no surprise that I am in support of the mayor's proclamation and strongly urge this body to continue the people's work. We've come too far to lose sight of the future that all of the people in this city believe is possible. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other councilor? Seeing none. Correspondence announcements from the president and the vice president communication. I do have something. I want to say that the act of vandalism that happened in our city should neither be tolerated or accepted anywhere in our community. When we stop talking to each other, when we stop debating those who don't agree with us, that's the moment we as a community start going apart. I trust that we will move forward after this incident and we will come together as the welcoming community that we are. Now we're going to report from standing committees. Finance, Councilor Rist.
Thank you, Mr. President. We will meet on the 14th, which is next week, to discuss the items on our agenda that will be moved to our committee. Also, we're going to discuss meeting with the school committee's finance committee. I've been asked to discuss that as whether it's necessary yet to do so. So that'll be on the agenda. The finance committee did meet and approve 3-0 removing Chapter 329 Acts of 1987 from our agenda. The reason is the city attorney's opinion is quite thorough and basically states that without a charter change, this act cannot be adopted. Such a charter change would be a major change in the way our city government has been set up from the beginning. Our city government was set up as a mayor-centric form of government. If it were to change, giving the school committee authority to go directly to the city council for its budget, bypassing the mayor, that would be a change that, in this opinion, in my opinion, a charter change necessary that the voters should make, because the voters made the original decision. In any case, the Finance Committee recognized that that opinion prevents the council from adopting Chapter 329 at this time. We make no recommendation on the merits of 329, only that it cannot be adopted at this time, given the city attorney's opinion. And I will make a motion when it's appropriate to remove it from the agenda, if there's any discussion, Mr. President.
Let's make a motion.
I move that the city council remove from the finance committee the request to accept Chapter 329 Acts of 1987 without prejudice.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to remove the request to accept Chapter 329 of Act of 1987. Any further discussion? Seeing none, Barbara.
Connie Denham. Aye. Salem Derby.
Aye.
Omar Gomez.
Aye.
J.P. Kaczynski.
Aye.
Dave Munier.
Aye.
Tom Peak.
Aye.
Brad Riley.
Aye.
Dan Rist.
Aye.
Owen Zaret.
Aye.
Motion passes, Councilor Rest.
That concludes, Mr. President.
Thank you, Councilor Rest. Police Safety, Councilor Sarat.
Thank you, Mr. President. So we met since our last meeting, we met last night, and we also met in August. Our August meeting was with the DPW, Director Nuttleman, That's when we discussed the fuel storage issue also. Highlights from that meeting were we had Mark Gregory from Traffic Logic, who presented to us on the electric speed sign item. We looked at a few of the products they offer, as well as some speed tables and speed humps. And Director Nuttleman talked about some upcoming projects, particularly discussing Route 10 in light of the recent tragedy there. That is a DOT project. There have been many conversations on the state level trying to move that forward, but he did alert us also that's a long-standing project that needs to be done, and there is needs for water and sewer infrastructure there. We met last night, had a fantastic presentation from the fire department. Chief Norris and Deputy Chief Benson were there in attendance. Highlights from that meeting. They are looking to hire 2 new firefighters. We discussed a few of their ongoing grant applications and receipts. There is a brush truck that is desperately in need of replacement. I believe that they will be receiving money for that. We received, again, their call volume. I just want to impress on the city that the fire department is bringing in $1.2 million in revenue from call volume, and that's an increase of almost $500,000 over the last 2 fiscal years. Subsequent to that, we will be receiving 2 new ambulances in February. I believe one was from a grant, and the other one was cannabis revenue. There's also many upcoming community campaigns. Those include CPR training and fire extinguisher training. And also they mentioned the need to install backup cameras on a couple of the engines and ambulances. The health department was also in attendance. And highlights there'll be a flu clinic in October 15th, a community flu clinic. And we were able to welcome our community social worker, Elizabeth Pluff, and got to learn about all of the really wonderful new amenities that are going to be available to the city now through having another dedicated mental health worker, I should say. The police already do have one, but Elizabeth will be able to expand a lot of options for the city. Very important topic that we discussed there is the unhoused population and the housing insecure population, and both some regional and local initiatives that are being taken place to address that issue. We will be discussing the Ordinance Review Committee final report at our next meeting, which is October 11th. We'll also be meeting with Police Department for their quarterly report at that time. The sidewalk, review of the sidewalk on South and Main Street, and particularly the discussion of the light there. We're in a holding pattern as we are waiting for traffic counts to come in with the new school, so hopefully we'll know something certainly by next month, but definitely when Director Nuttleman returns for his report in November. I mentioned the electric speed signs. I do notice that it appeared, I don't know if I wasn't at the last meeting, was there a motion to extend? There's 2 items here that expired, so will those need to be reintroduced, or can I make a motion now just to extend those? Okay, so at this time, I'd like to make a motion to extend the review of South Main Street 4-way traffic light and the review of electric speed monitoring signs, 90 days for both of those, please.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to extend the review of South and Main Street 4-way traffic light and the review of use of electric speed monitors for 90-day extension. Any further discussion? Seeing none, Barbara.
Salem Derby.
Aye.
Omar Gomez.
Aye.
JP Kaczynski. Dave
He said
Munier.
yes.
Yep.
Aye.
Tom Peak.
Aye.
Brad Riley.
Aye.
Dan Rist.
Aye.
Owen Zaret.
Aye.
Connie Denham. Aye.
Just a quick
Motion
thank you.
passes.
Sorry. Just a quick thank you to our new counselor and new member of public safety, Counselor Munier, who stepped into the clerk role and has provided us with exceptional minutes, which I've been forwarding to you. And again, our next meeting is October 11th, 6 p.m. in room 1, and thus concludes.
Thank you, Councilor Zaret. Appointments, Councilor Riley.
Thank you, Mr. President. The appointment committee last met on Thursday, August 11th, to discuss the appointments of Kathy Schweitzer to the Council on Aging and Lisa Ponce to the Manhan Rail Trail Committee. Dr. Schweitzer had a robust career in higher education athletics, including but not limited to being the director of athletics at Springfield College and president of the National Association of Division III Athletic Administrators. Her leadership and careful attention to organizational needs, in my opinion, would be an asset to the Council on Aging. Ms. Ponce described the ways that the Manhan Rail Trail has positively contributed to her time as an Easthampton resident, regularly using the trail as both means of recreation, health, and wellness, and as a mode of transportation to and from work. As a member of the committee, she would like to understand and advocate for ways to increase rail trail accessibility, making it more accommodating to all of our residents. The appointment committee voted 3-0 to recommend both appointees. So first, in the form of a motion, I'd like to approve Kathy Schweitzer to the Council on Aging with a term expiration date of December 31st, 2023.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to accept the appointment from Kathy to the COA, expiration term 12/31st, 2023. Any further discussion? Seeing none, Barbara.
Omar Gomez.
Aye.
JP Kaczynski.
Aye.
Dave Munier. Tom Peak.
Aye.
Brad Riley.
Aye.
Dan Rist.
Aye.
Owen Zaret.
Aye.
Connie Denham.
Aye.
Salem Derby.
Aye.
Motion passes. Councilor Riley.
And then in the form of a motion, I'd like to approve Lisa Ponce to the Manhan Rail Trail Committee with a term expiration date of December 31st, 2024.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to accept the appointment of Lisa Pons for Manhattan Rail Trail of the expiration term 12/31st, 2024. Any further discussion? Seeing none, Barbara.
JP Kaczynski.
Aye.
Dave Munier. Tom Peak.
Aye.
Brad Riley.
Aye.
Dan Rist.
Aye.
Owen Zaret.
Aye.
Connie Denham.
Aye.
Salem Derby.
Aye.
Omar Gomez.
Aye, motion passes. Do you schedule any meetings?
Yes, so the appointment committee will meet next on Thursday, September 15th at 5:30 PM in the basement conference room B, and thus concludes my report.
Thank you, Councilor Riley. Ordinance, Councilor Derby.
Thank you, Mr. President. The ordinance has not met in a little while on summer hiatus. We will meet, though, September 20th at 6 p.m. That meeting is going to be where we're going to focus on the vacant storefront ordinance, which we've been working on with the EDIC. We had been waiting to hear back from the building commissioner, which we did, and hoping to get the building commissioner at that meeting, along with members of the EDIC. One of the things as far as housekeeping, I did talk to the mayor about her request to establish an ordinance regarding flags. We did work on it a little bit. Since then, she has requested that we remove it without prejudice, as she feels that the executive order that she signed was sufficient, and the city is waiting on, precedent as far as the law goes before we pass any particular ordinance. So that being said, I'd like to make a request to remove the request from the mayor to establish an ordinance regarding flags and banners without prejudice.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to remove from the mayor to establish ordinance without prejudice, to remove it without prejudice. Any further discussion? Seeing none, Barbara.
Dave Munier.
Aye.
Tom Peak.
Aye.
Brad Riley.
Aye.
Dan Rist.
Aye.
Owen Zaret.
Aye.
Connie Denham.
Aye.
Salem Derby.
Aye.
Omar Gomez.
Aye.
JP Kaczynski.
Aye.
Motion passes. Councilor Derby.
Thank you, Mr. President. And I just wanted to remind people that are interested in the vacant storefront ordinance that we will be meeting Tuesday, September 20th at 6 p.m. This concludes.
Thank you, Councilor Derby. Councilor Property, Councilor Kaczynski.
Thank you, Mr. President. We do have a member of an engineering team that's been patiently waiting with us in case any of the councilors had questions regarding the gas line utility easement request on Liberty Street. So thank you, Jason Bascom, for being here. I appreciate that. I don't know if there would be any questions about this. Basically, the situation is there is a current gas line that needs to be replaced, and with an 8-inch high-pressure main. And the easement request is for property the city has just to the, I'll call it the north, to the pond side of the bridge on Liberty Street, Mill Pond side. And there are two parcels. We have a resolution for the city council to consider. adopting, and I would be happy to put that in forth of a motion or to share the screen to show any pictures of this. The city, the property committee did meet and discussed this matter and voted 3-0 to recommend approval.
Any councilor have any question about this process? Councilor Rist?
Just a point of process. This is an easement request. It doesn't need a public hearing, Barbara? Okay. You think I'd know this by now?
Councilor Denham?
I just, point of clarification, is this a line that is currently serving residents' homes, or is this a line that's going to allow for future access to gas in residential homes?
Councilor Kosinski, you want to answer that? You want to let?
I will give it a quick shot, and Jason, feel free to jump in at any point. This is for a replacement of an existing line, and that it gives a little bit more, I believe, the high pressure and other technical matters, but it is not like bringing in gas to the entire city in the high pressure line that is running through our entire city. It's an isolated area. It's an easement for an isolated area. Jason?
Before
Yes,
Jason,
that is correct. Yep, the existing line is
excuse me,
within-
Jason. Excuse me.
Yes.
Before Jason, that answer your question? Or
It
do you
didn't,
need-
but I was hoping what he was going, the next person was
Okay,
going to say.
I just want to know. Jason?
Yes, so yes, what he said is correct. The existing line within Liberty Street is dated and needs to be replaced with the new line. And this line will basically, replace what is existing, and it just needs to go in a new location, which will put it outside of public right-of-way of Liberty Street and onto the actual city property just north of the bridge there. And pretty much describes it.
Thank you, Jason. Councilor Riley?
So in terms of when this process would take place, I know that Mass DOT is currently in the process of looking at that bridge on Liberty Street and potentially doing a massive infrastructure project. So is that going to be taken into consideration in terms of when it's being built and making sure that Mass DOT has that information in terms of, like if the line goes in before, I just want to make sure that they have all of the necessary blueprints for that area.
Correct, yeah, so I'm not entirely familiar with the Mass DOT project. This line is actually being pushed to the north away from the bridge. I think it'll be about, I want to say about 30 feet north of the bridge or more, so that this will actually help that project, since it'll get the gas line further away from the bridge rather than running through the bridge like it currently is.
Thank you. Any other councilor? Councilor Kosinski?
I will say that I had a conversation with our DPW director, Greg Nuttleman, and he is fully in support of this easement and the moving of the gas line to the north of the bridge.
Thank you. Councilor Kosinski, we're ready for the motion.
I move that the city grant of utility easements, a city council resolution, a resolution to grant certain utility easements relative to the premises more particularly described in the instruments of taking by the Easthampton office of the city of the collector of taxes recorded in the Hampshire County Registry of Deeds, book 10549 at pages 280, 281, 282, 283, as further described in the judgment dated March 20, 2012, recorded in the Hampshire County Registry of Deeds, book 10861, page 31. Whereas the city of Easthampton owns certain real estate property described above, and whereas Eversource Gas Company of Massachusetts, doing business as Eversource Energies Massachusetts Corporation, having a place of business at 247 Station Drive, Westwood, Massachusetts, desires an easement as detailed in Exhibit A, attached here to and incorporated herein by reference to conduct its business easement. And whereas the city council for the city of Easthampton, Massachusetts, believes it's in the best interest of the inhabitants of the city of Easthampton, Massachusetts, to grant the easements detailed Exhibit A. Now therefore be resolved that the mayor for the city of Easthampton is hereby authorized to negotiate, execute, and record in the Registry of Deeds for Hampshire County, Massachusetts, perpetual easements over real property owned by the city of Easthampton, described as in the instruments of taking by the Easthampton Office Collector, recorded in the Hampshire County Registry of Deeds, Book 10549 at pages 280, 281, 282, 283, and further described in the judgment dated March 20, 2012, recorded in the Hampshire County Registry of Deeds in Book 10861, page 31, in favor of Eversource. This resolution shall become effective upon passage and according to the rules and regulations of the Charter for the City of Easthampton, Massachusetts, and the general laws of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts.
Second.
We have a motion and a second for the Eversource easement request. Any further discussion? Councilor Denham?
Yeah, I just want to say that I think what's happening with fossil fuels, when I think about the climate, et cetera, I think we need to be pulling away from fossil fuels and not providing new opportunities for increased infrastructure, et cetera. And so I'm struggling with this a little bit. I understand that it's a replacement, but at the same time, when I look outside and I see what's happening, when I experienced, this summer with the heat, et cetera, like fossil fuels are driving that. And I think as a city, we need to be more conscientious of thinking about how can we remove ourselves, divest ourselves from fossil fuels. And so I'm just saying that.
Any other councilor? Councilor Derby?
I would agree with Councilor Denham. I think, this council passed a resolution about a climate emergency, and we saw this summer that has continued to be an issue. The only thing that I would take exception to is that I think what we saw in Andover was a lack of infrastructure improvement and maintaining what was currently there. And I think that we have to think about public safety as it relates to maintaining the infrastructures there and find other ways to encourage people to use alternative sources of fuel. But we don't want to let things fall by the wayside, which are going to put people in danger. So I think it's there's a two-pronged approach here. We need to maintain the infrastructure, but also encourage people to find alternatives and to acknowledge that. So I'm glad it was brought up. But I just wanted to say that.
Thank you, Councilor. Any other councilor? Seeing none, Barbara?
Tom Peak.
Aye.
Brad Riley.
Aye.
Dan Rist.
Aye.
Owen Zarrett.
Aye.
Connie Denham.
Abstain.
Salem Derby.
Aye.
Omar Gomez.
Aye.
JP Kaczynski.
Aye.
Dave Munier.
Motion passes. Councilor Kwasinski?
Thank you. I wanted to ask the president what you may have thought about perhaps entertaining a motion to move the new city infrastructure master plan and quick action, which was given over at the last meeting to the property committee, to perhaps ordinance. Would you be willing to entertain such a motion at this time?
To public safety, right? Yeah, to public safety.
To public safety.
Yes.
I move to move the matter of new city infrastructure master plan and quick actions to public safety.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to move the new city infrastructure master plan and quick action to the public safety. Any further discussion? Seeing none, Barbara?
Brad Riley.
Aye.
Dan Rist.
Aye.
Owen Zarrett.
Aye.
Connie Denham.
Aye.
Salem Derby.
Aye.
Omar Gomez.
Aye.
JP Kaczynski.
Aye.
Dave Munier. Tom Peak.
Aye.
Motion passes. Councilor Kwasinski?
I wanted to report that the property committee has met several times in August to discuss the matter of the three schools, Maple, Center, and Pepin. We did tour the facility during that time, all three facilities, and in fact were joined by many members of the public, many of whom had not been there in quite some time, including some members who had been from private groups, private nonprofits who had expressed interest at that time to consider the possibility of renting some of the space, which I think is an important question for us to consider as we proceed. We also heard from several advocates for affordable housing, of which I'm one, and I think we definitely need to have more affordable housing here in Easthampton. But we also heard from a few other areas, and that was perhaps at least reserving one of the buildings as a municipal hub. Some called it intergenerational space for multi-purpose uses, primarily public. Range of possibilities definitely included the additional gym space to be shared by all ages, perhaps seniors, youth, and adults. And we did, interestingly, hear from the department, the rec department. John Mason also dropped by. He said something to the effect of any recreation director who didn't support saving an intact gymnasium really wouldn't be doing their job. He did note that we had to dig into the costs of maintaining the facility, and of course, those costs would have to be examined. So the additional space of the auditorium upstairs, there is a 300-seat auditorium fully intact with a theater and lights. It's pretty remarkable upstairs at this time. So, and the other fact was the building contains an elevator already in place on site. So those are where we're at. We're going to be meeting again tomorrow evening at 6 o'clock. We did have several inputs from our consultant that we'll perhaps be considering at that time. I would at this time ask for a 90-day extension on this matter so that we can continue that discussion. And I would do so in the form of a motion.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to extend 90-day the elementary school reuse request for proposal. Any further discussion, Councilor Rist?
I am opposed to this. We have had 2 years of a use committee that has looked at this. This RFP was given to us in June, and it should be put forward. I thought we might be putting it out there for a public hearing next meeting. It does not, if we did that, it does not discount any of the other capabilities that Councilor Kozinski mentioned for the buildings, but it gets things in motion. We cannot wait 90 more days for this to happen. I would be in favor of a 2-week extension, and I would like to see us put a public hearing forward. I will not vote in favor of this.
Councilor Sarat?
Mr. President, in regard to the statement of the prior speaker, I'm in agreement that there's no need for a 90-day extension. We discussed in the meeting setting a public hearing for September 21st. So I think any extension on this matter should essentially get us to that point. And
thank you.
And certainly at that point, if there's extenuating circumstances, we can certainly extend it further. But from my understanding, and certainly as a member, both a member of the committee and a member of this council, it makes sense to basically make sure that everything is kosher, so to speak, with the agenda. This item technically is expired. We need to extend it to at least basically the 21st of September, from my understanding of our proceedings. And I think that's all we need to do.
Councilor Riley?
I will say it is our.
Excuse me, Councilor Kozinski. Councilor
Thank
Riley?
you.
Yes, I'm obviously opposed to a 90-day extension as well. We need to have a public hearing on this issue. Irrespective of where the development proposals come from, affordable housing has always been one of the primary goals of these developments. And every month that we delay this process from going forward is another month that families in Easthampton are more further in debt because of the cost of rent that is unaffordable, or they end up in homeless shelters. Once you are in a homeless shelter, breaking generational poverty is exponentially harder than if you already have a place to live. This potentially puts families at generational harm by waiting. We can't wait anymore. The RFP makes room for the suggestions that other people have put forward. Let's start the process now so we can see who's placing bids, and then we can have those conversations then. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Kosinski?
Mr. President, this was a perfunctory, typical 90-day extension. This had no intent to extend or imply in any way, because my next statement was that the council had, the property committee had voted 3-0 to recommend to the council that we set a public hearing. We had recommended during that time to set the public hearing for September 21st. The only reason to extend was that if the, for some reason, the meeting was not on the 21st or something happened, that this would cover that time frame. Mr. President, I would be happy to move to set the public hearing.
We have a motion and a second first for to extend it for 90 days. That I want
Extend
to
for
remind
90 days, that is true.
Remind the council that this motion is amendable. So anyone can make a motion to amend it if they need it. Councilor Rist.
I move that we amend the motion for 21 days, or 14 days.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to amend the main motion for how many days you said?
From 90 days to 14 days,
For 90 days to 14 days.
to match the 21st.
Any further discussion? Councilor Sarat.
Just a quick question of, I guess, procedure or clarification. So even after we potentially meet on the 21st, and if there's a vote that occurs, the ongoing discussion in terms of receipt of proposals and discussions in the property committee will take place as part of the process. So just my question is, will we have to continue this agenda item? We will have a different agenda item for that. That's all I just wanted to understand.
Just for clarification, it's going to be different. We're working on the RFP first, and then it's going to be the proposal. So it's two different items.
Okay, I just want nomenclature.
Yep.
Thank you.
Point of order, Mr. President, I think my amendment needed a second.
What's the second?
You
What's the
got it.
second? What's the second? We have a
Okay,
motion and a
after
second. That's
clean
what,
my ears.
that's why we have a further discussion. Barbara.
Dan Rist,
Aye.
Gordon Zarrett,
Aye.
Connie Denham. Salem Derby.
Aye.
Omar Gomez.
Aye.
JP Kaczynski.
Aye.
David Munier. Tom Peak.
Aye.
Fred Riley.
Aye.
Motion passes. Councilor Kosinski.
I would be happy to suggest that this council entertain a public hearing on the topic of the school reuse request for proposals and disposition votes, or request for proposals, rather.
Second?
We have a motion and a second to schedule a public hearing for the September 21st at 6:15 at this chamber. Any further discussion? Seeing none, Barbara.
Okay, I just have a question about exactly what you want me to put for the public hearing.
I was putting forth a motion that we would be discussing the elementary school reuse request for proposal. That was the motion.
Barbara.
Owen Zarrett.
Aye.
Connie Denham.
Aye.
Salem Derby.
Aye.
Omar Gomez.
Aye.
JP Kaczynski.
Aye.
Dave Munier. Tom Peak.
Aye.
Brad Riley.
Aye.
Dan Rist.
Aye.
Motion passes. Does conclude, Councilor Kosinski?
That concludes the property committee report.
Thank you, Councilor Kosinski. Rules, Councilor Rist.
Yes, Mr. President, we met a couple weeks ago and we discussed the gun violence resolution as submitted by Councilor Zarrett. There was sufficient discussion of amendments to this resolution as it's presented, and the fact that it is another resolution which you've already passed. The amount of amendments suggested that we should present to the council a new resolution because there would be just too much language changes in the current one. So I am going to move to remove, without prejudice, the current gun violence resolution as submitted by Councilor Zarrett from the agenda in favor of any new one that might be put forward if council desires. So I'll make that motion unless there's discussion.
We need a second.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to remove without prejudice the gun violence resolution. Any further discussion? Councilor Derby?
I'm just curious, because I feel like we passed this in the.
Yes, one of the
before.
discussions was that it was redundant, but I didn't want to bring that up.
Okay. And so was it quite different from what we passed the last time?
Let me just say there was disagreement in some of the areas in the resolution regarding the police department and other areas. I don't want to get into the details, but there was enough suggested changes by the committee that I felt the council should make a new decision on it with a whole new resolution, since it would be major changes.
Okay. Yeah, pardon my ignorance for not attending the meeting. I apologize.
That's okay.
Any other councilor? Councilor Sarat?
I just wanted to address this topic because I think it's important. I want to first start off by addressing the redundancy issue. So we already voted on this resolution once before, and we've affirmed it. The reason it was reintroduced, and frankly in my mind should be reintroduced every year, is because in 2021 there were 693 mass shootings. And unlike many resolutions that we submit where there's an endpoint, we're looking for the legislator to pass a certain law or we're supporting a certain measure. Gun violence and the ongoing murder of adults and children in schools, it's not ending. And at the time, when I introduced this in the wake of Uvalde and Buffalo before it, and then following that, Highland Park and all the many other instances in between, there was just more the other day, I felt it was certainly my responsibility as a gun sense advocate and someone who's been working closely with Moms Demand Action, Every Town for Gun Safety, to bring this to the council again. Now, possibly I could have just offered updates and statistics and left it at that and not submitted another resolution, but I felt it was important, especially with the change in recent gun laws. I respect members of the council who have different feelings and sentiment around the role of, or the lack of a role of law enforcement in the community or at large. And certainly that was vocalized in June. I was surprised to have had essentially no communication around this topic for 10 weeks until we met. In all transparency, I don't have access to the chair of this committee because they've stayed on public record they would not receive or return my phone calls. And I was surprised that we spent so much time focusing on police abolishment in this conversation instead of focusing on the ongoing murder of innocent people. And while I respectfully agree that that's a topic we can discuss, and if someone wants to introduce ordinances or rules or another resolution around that issue, I would certainly think that the council should entertain it. I also feel that a lot of work went into this. This is the product of work with two national groups, Moms Demand Action, Every Town for Gun Safety, both of whom reviewed the language. I don't know if anyone from the committee reached out to either of those groups to vet that information. There were footnotes included in the resolution that explained some of the statistics that were used. Some of that information, which was referred to as racist in the meeting. And I wonder if the members who did so actually researched the reference statistics. There were no attempts made to communicate with the sponsor, again, in the 10 weeks that passed between introducing this and having a meeting. And then a series of edits were introduced that weren't really edits at all. They were an entirely new document that literally ignored the matter before the council and the committee. So yes, remove it, that's fine, but I do feel that it's important to put this on the record because a lot of time goes into this stuff. And to have comments expressed without real conversations with the sponsor and colleagues, I think is a lost opportunity. That's all.
Councilor Denham?
I just want to make clear for the record, there was no conversation about the abolishing the police. I think the conversation evolved around what is the role of the police, and the police cannot be the only response for a public health crisis, which is what gun violence is. And so that was the content of what the conversation was. And I also read the footnotes and went to those cited references to read what was being said. It was not said that those comments were racist. What was said was that it is important to understand that if we put that information out, which basically said that people of color around the world are violent, then we need to be mindful of what we're saying. Nothing was said about this is racist or you're racist for saying this, etc. It was addressing the fact of how it could be perceived by a committee that is predominantly white. And I think that is a distinction that the public should understand.
Thank you, Councilor.
Point of order, Mr. President. Debating what we have before us, if I'm not correct, is a motion to remove the gun violence resolution without prejudice from our agenda. I don't feel that we should be discussing the content of the resolution or communication at this point.
As a council president, I think that was really important to hear both councilors to see what happened and the reason that we're moving out of without prejudice, and I know we'll take it. So I have to add to clarify the committees is a place to work, is a place to collaborate. Not necessarily we have to be working without having those meetings. We should take those opportunity as an opportunity too. Sometimes we are busy, sometimes that's the only place that we can work together, because we are 9 members, and the 9 members, we think differently. I do agree that both councilors have a really good point, but I do agree with Councilor Denham. I think that particular resolution have some language that was important to have a discussion, and sadly we cannot make an agreement now, and that's the reason we are removing it. Barbara?
Connie Denham. Aye. Salem Derby.
Aye.
Omar Gomez.
Aye.
J.P. Kaczynski.
Aye.
Dave Munier.
Aye.
Tom Peak.
Aye.
Brad Riley.
Aye.
Dan Rist.
Aye.
Owen Zaret.
Aye.
Motion passes. Councilor Rist?
On a more positive note, we have before us a request for a conflict of interest exemption from Julianne Ursa. You just recently, she's still here, heard her eloquence with regard to the project or the research she put out. She is requesting a conflict of interest exemption because she does work for the city as a special municipal employee, which is an MGL that allows for our volunteers to participate and simply state their conflict of interest. She didn't have to do this. But to quote Councilor Riley, she took the initiative to be transparent, quote unquotes, to make sure that the city knew her role with regard to her expertise in regard to her work with the planning department. Now I'll just read one part of her letter for the record and for the public. As I see it, namely Julie is saying this, as I see it, my interest in all of these roles is to work for the best interest of the city of Easthampton. As a salaried employee of Fuss and O'Neill, my compensation is not directly tied to the performance of or dollar amounts of any contract between my employer and the city of Easthampton. I have always recused myself from any Conservation Commission business which intersects with any work that Fawcett O'Neill may be doing for the city and will continue to do so. It is my pleasure and honor to serve Easthampton. Please let me know if I can provide further detail. She is currently the Conservation Chair, and all I can say is, councilors, this is the kind of volunteer we want on our committees that is completely transparent. And the fact that we have a scientist leading a very important committee is, we thank you. That is such a benefit to this city. So without further ado, I will make a motion, Mr. President. I move that the council approve a conflict of interest exemption for Julianne Bursa according to MGL Chapter 268A, Section 20D.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the conflict of interest exemption request. Any further discussion? Seeing none, Barbara.
Salem Derby.
Aye.
Omar Gomez.
Aye.
JP Kaczynski.
Aye.
Dave Munier. Tom Peak.
Aye.
Brad Riley.
Aye.
Dan Rist.
Aye.
Owen Zarrett.
Aye.
Connie Denham.
Motion passes. New business, Councilor Vice President Derby.
Thank you, Mr. President. We have one new mayoral appointment, so I will make a motion to move David Crutcher to the EDIC with a term expiration of 12/31/2023 to Appointment Subcommittee.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to move the mayoral appointment to the Appointments Committee. Any further discussion? Seeing none, Barbara.
Omar Gomez.
Aye.
JP Kaczynski.
Aye.
Dave Munier.
Aye.
Tom Peak.
Aye.
Brad Riley.
Aye.
Dan Rist.
Aye.
Owen Zarrett.
Aye.
Connie Denham. Salem Derby.
Aye. And I also we have a request to create a Municipal Veterans Assistant Fund, MGL Chapter 60, Section 3F. I would move to send that to Finance.
Second, Mr. President. I thought we were going to vote on this.
We have a motion and a
Oh, we're
second.
gonna-
We have to remove it first, so that way we can
I'll
vote
retract
for
my
it.
second.
Okay, I retract my motion.
Okay, sorry.
Councilor Rist.
Unless the councilor objects, since this is an obvious, the request comes from the Veterans Agent. It's an account that would allow to accept donations where funds would be used to support a range of assistance to veteran or surviving spouses. So it's a no-brainer. So unless anybody objects, I'll read the motion.
Any councilor have any objection of voting tonight? Seeing none, Councilor Rist.
I move that we establish a Municipal Veterans Assistant Fund. The Easthampton Veterans District requests the establishment of a Municipal Veterans Assistant Fund in accordance with MGL Chapter 60, Section 3F. The fund will be created from voluntary donations from Easthampton residents as additional amounts that they elect to include with their property of excise tax bill or direct donations. The funds will be used to provide assistance to veterans or surviving spouses who reside in the city of Easthampton. The fund will be used to provide assistance with emergency situations such as food insecurity, transportation, heating expenses, or housing issues that cannot be dealt with through any other available programs.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to establish a Municipal Veteran Assistance Fund account. Any further discussion? Seeing none, Barbara.
JP Kaczynski.
Aye.
Dave Munier. Tom Peak.
Aye.
Brad Riley.
Aye.
Dan Rist.
Aye.
Owen Zarrett.
Aye.
Connie Denham. Salem Derby.
Aye.
Omar Gomez.
Aye. Motion passes. Councilor Derby.
Thank you. And so this one is getting sent to committee. So I'd like to move to request to amend City Ordinances Chapter 6, Section 6-21, Storage of Unregistered Vehicles to Ordinance Committee.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to request to amend the city ordinance storage of unregistered vehicles to the ordinance committee. Any further discussion? Seeing none, Barbara.
Dave Munier. Tom Peak.
Aye.
Brad Riley.
Aye.
Dan Rist.
Aye.
Owen Zarrett.
Aye.
Connie Denham. Salem Derby.
Aye.
Omar Gomez.
Aye.
JP Kaczynski.
Aye.
Motion passes.
And before I turn it over to the Chair of Finance, we have a resolution in support of changing the flag and seal of Massachusetts. That's not something that we're passing tonight, is it? Or are we sending it to
If
committee?
any councilor is against to pass the resolutions tonight,
Okay, so
if
we're not
no,
sending it to
we
rules.
will
All right.
pass it tonight.
Okay. And so I will read this in totality here. Looks like there's a back. So Bear with me. Resolution in support of changing the state flag and seal of Massachusetts. Sponsors Owen Zarek, Counselor at Large, Salem Derby, Counselor Precinct 4, Omar Gomez, Counselor Precinct 2. Whereas the history of the state of Massachusetts is replete with instances of conflict between European colonists and native nations of the region, who first extended the hand of friendship to the colonists on their shores in 1620 and helped them survive starvation during the settlers' first winters on their land. Whereas members of the native nation for whom the state of Massachusetts is named were ambushed and killed by Miles Standish, first commander of the Plymouth colony, in April of 1623, barely 2 years after the Pilgrims arrived on their shores. Whereas the current native nations within the Commonwealth of Massachusetts include Mashpee Wampanoag, Aquina Wampanoag, and Nipmuc Nation. Whereas the colonial broadsword brandished above the head of the native man on the Massachusetts state flag and seal is modeled after Miles Standish's own broadsword, borrowed for that purpose from the Pilgrim Hall in Plymouth by the illustrator Edmund Garnett in 1884. Whereas the belt binding the native's cloak on the flag and seal is modeled after a belt worn by Metacomet, known to the English as King Philip, who was among the Wampanoag leaders who restored a mutually destructive war in 1675 to 76 in defense of native lands against colonial encroachment. Whereas the portions of the body of the native man in the flag and seal were modeled from a native skeleton kept in Winthrop, the bow modeled after a bow taken from a native man shot and killed by colonists in Sudbury in 1665, and his facial features taken from a photograph of Ojibwe, chief of Great Falls, Montana, considered to be, by the illustrator, to be a fine specimen of an Indian, quote unquote, though not from Massachusetts. Whereas the history of relations between Massachusetts since colonial times and the native nations who continue to live within its borders includes the forced internment of thousands of so-called praying Indians on Deer Island in Boston Harbor, where they died by the hundreds of exposure in 1675, their subsequent enslavement in Boston, Bermuda, and the Caribbean islands, and offering 40 pounds of sterling as bounty for the scalps of native men, women, and children in Massachusetts beginning in 1686, increased to 100 pounds sterling for the scalps of native adult males by 1722, half that amount for native women and children. Whereas Native Americans were legally prohibited from even stepping foot into Boston from 1675 until 2004, when that law finally was repealed. Whereas the 400th anniversary of the landing of the colonists at Plymouth Plantation in the year 2020 afforded every citizen of the Commonwealth a chance to reflect upon the history, to come to an awareness of the possibility of a better relationship between the descendants of the colonial immigrants and the native nations of the Commonwealth. Whereas Native Americans have endured and long suffered the many abuses of racism through intentional genocide, intentional cultural genocide, through the forcible removal of children from families to industrial and boarding schools, forcible dispossession, removal, and lack of access to traditional lands, and indentured servitude. Whereas such abuses that continue to this day include marginalization, oppression, invisibilization, lack of adequate health care, forcible removal of children from families and communities through child services, continued lack of access to traditional lands, and lack of autonomy over identity and representation, such as the cultural appropriation of their symbols and images for public schools and sports teams. Whereas the area now known as the city of Easthampton shares a rich native history with tribal nations such as the Nonotuck, the Norwottuck, who lived in this area for thousands of years before the first colonial settlers arrived in 1654. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the City of Easthampton hereby adopts this resolution in support of the work of the Special Commission relative to the seal and motto of the Commonwealth, established by a resolve of the General Court in 2020 and appointed by the Governor to recommend changes to the current flag and seal of Massachusetts, and in support of a new seal and motto for the Commonwealth that may better reflect our aspirations for harmonious and respectful relations between all people who now call Massachusetts home. The city clerk shall forward a copy of this resolution to Senator Mark Pacheco, Representative Antonio Cabral, co-chairs of the Joint Committee on State Administration, who serve as members of the Special Commission relative to the seal and motto of the Commonwealth, and to Senator John Vilas and Representative Daniel Carey, with the request that they continue their support for the work of the aforementioned Special Commission.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the resolution in support of changing the flag and seal of Massachusetts. Any further discussion? Councilor Sarat?
Just a couple of things. I just wanted to thank the organization, Change the State Flag, that's been working on this for a long time. Sarah Weinberger spoke earlier, and we had another speaker in support of this. I appreciate that. And David Detmold, who I mentioned in the cover letter, who was chairing at Cultural Chaos, particular members of our indigenous community, Rhonda Anderson, Ella Alkowitz, who helped with the language, but certainly just in general, all members of our indigenous community as we stand here or sit here on land of the Nonotuck, the Norwatuk, and the Nipmuc, that we are doing a service to at least enact probably the smallest of reparations, where many, many more are needed, in accordance with the work we've already done in recognizing Indigenous Peoples Day. This is just the smallest thing we could do to support what's right, to change symbolism on our state flag and seal that is from a bygone time that certainly is not representative of my values. So I appreciate the council and I appreciate the co-sponsors on this item, and I'll be obviously voting yes.
Councilor Rist.
Yes, I want to thank Councilor Zara, Councilor Gomez, and Councilor Derby for putting this forward. I know and recognize that words mean a lot and they say a lot, but pictures say 1,000 times more. And the picture that is our flag is something we should have changed years ago. We see the movement to change the names of sports teams and the names of mascots and everything, and people think it's frivolous. It is not frivolous. The people that are represented or are insulted by this flag mean something, and I'm very grateful that this has been put forward, and I hope that the legislation comes forward quickly from the state. Thank you, all three of you, for putting this forward.
Councilor Derby.
You know, so as probably, I think I'm the only person here that is a member of a federally recognized tribe, which is the Wampanoag tribe of Aquinnah, which used to be Gay Head. I'm very thankful for this being put forward. I'm pretty lucky because I was able to go to Martha's Vineyard a couple of weeks ago and spend some time on our tribal reservation and reflect on this that was coming forward, Indigenous People Day. And it, you know, like spending time out there was pretty moving for me, thinking about the history of my ancestors. And, you know, I think this is an acknowledgement that is long due, and I appreciate everybody's help with this. So thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Derby. Councilor Kosinski.
Wanted to say that words and symbols have meanings. And when one begins to pick apart the symbols on the state flag, one can't but help to think that this is so long overdue that the legislature ought to get going and do it in this session. My only reservation in having us pass this resolution in one sitting is that I think anyone from the city who has the opportunity to listen to this description of the flag ought to be hearing this more and more often so that they fully understand how words and symbols have the wrong meaning. And we need to work to find words and symbols that reflect our current values.
Thank you, Councilor Kosinski. Before voting, I just want to add, thank you, Councilor Sarret, Councilor Derby. For me, as being Puerto Rican is really important. Symbols are really important for me. You can see, guys, I have one. If you're Puerto Rican, you will know they came from the Taínos, the native of Puerto Rico. We are a mix of 3 different cultures. One of them is the native of Puerto Rico, they're not the Taínos. And anywhere we see symbols like from the Taínos, we know that you're Puerto Rican. So symbols means a lot. So thank you. Barbara.
Tom Peak.
Aye.
Brad Riley.
Aye.
Dan Rist.
Aye.
Owen Zaret.
Yes.
Connie Denham. Salem Derby.
Aye.
Omar Gomez.
Aye.
JP Kaczynski.
Aye.
Dave Munier.
Motion passes.
And I will turn it over to Councilor Rist.
If it please the President, I will make a first reading of all 4 of these items and then send them to Finance Committee in one motion, if that's okay.
That's okay.
First, we have an interdepartmental transfer. A request is hereby made for approval of the following appropriation: $1,760 to be transferred from the reserve fund, to be transferred to the City Council Permanent Clerical, $1,760. The amount used will be amount requested will be used for the following purpose: to provide fiscal year 23 balance of funding for the city council clerk's salary. The next item is an interdepartmental transfer. The amount requested is $902.50 to be transferred from the reserve fund, $902.50 to be transferred to the mayor legal account, $902.50 for the following purpose. Received an FY22 legal bill for Clifford and Kenny after year-end close. The next item is a interdepartmental transfer. The amount requested is $54,267.91 to be transferred from the PEG access account, $54,267.91 to be transferred to the PEG access account, $54,267.91 to give approval to spend from the PEG access receipts reserved account for cable-related purposes consistent with the franchise agreement. The last item is a supplemental appropriation request. The following appropriation is requested: $255,576 to be appropriated from the CPA Reserve for Historic Resources, $208,000, and the CPA Reserve Fund, $47,576, for a total of $255,576 to be appropriated to the Old Town Hall second floor construction retained city match account, $255,576. The amounts requested for the following purpose: for CPA savings account for construction phase 2, restoration of second floor auditorium, and construction of the new ADA accessible entrance and elevator. I move that we send these four aforementioned items to the Finance Committee for review, and also to schedule a public hearing for the next meeting, September 21st in these chambers.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to move these four finance items to the Finance Committee and to schedule a public hearing for September 21st at 6:15. Any further discussion? Seeing none, Barbara?
Brad Riley.
Aye.
Dan Rist.
Aye.
Owen Zaret. Connie Denham. Salem Derby.
Aye.
Omar Gomez. JP Kaczynski.
Aye.
Dave Munier. Tom Peak.
Aye.
Motion passes. Look like we're done with the agenda. We'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to adjourn. Barbara?
Dan Rist.
Aye.
Owen Zaret.
Aye.
Connie Denham. Salem Derby.
Aye.
Omar Gomez.
Aye.
JP Kaczynski.
Aye.
Dave Munier.
This government meeting is brought to you by Eastworks and our
Motion
local
passes.
cable
Thank you, everybody.
subscribers.
Have a great
Got a
evening.
bunch of stuff to sign. Don't leave.